Hello, and welcome to this edition of Words on New Music. My name is Paul Muller in Los Angeles. Jim Goodin will join us from Brooklyn via video clip later in the program. Tonight we will hear the music of James Ross with excerpts from Adrift, his latest album release on Innocent Hands Recordings. Full disclosure here, I am a fan of his music, and James and I collaborated on a CD released last year. But as you will hear, the music of James Ross speaks for itself. So who is James Ross? Well, James is a guitarist and composer living in Brooklyn, New York. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he has studied guitar at the University of Pittsburgh and the Mannes College of Music in New York City. A composer in a variety of genres, James has written music for orchestral and chamber ensembles, as well as solo music for the guitar. He has also performed and recorded electronic and improvised music. As a classical guitarist, James has performed as a soloist and ensemble player throughout the northeastern United States. He received a solo recitalist fellowship from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and won the Mannes College of Music Concerto competition, resulting in a performance of Joaquin Rodrigo's Fantasia para Gentilhombre at Symphony Space in New York City. James has also contributed to a number of the weekly Improv Friday events, and this is where I first encountered his music. The first excerpt I will play, titled Wash 2, is from one of those Improv Friday postings. This is one of my favorite pieces by James, a slowly building looped construction made up of some beautifully simple guitar sounds. The entire piece is some 25 minutes in length, and yet leaves the listener wanting more. So here, from 2010, is a generous helping of Wash 2 by James Ross. That was an excerpt from Wash 2 by James Ross from a 2010 Improv Friday event. You can clearly hear in this piece the characteristic patience, simplicity, and well-chosen textures that mark James's music. Wash 2 has an understated, thoughtful elegance, and I very much like this piece. James is also active in the local New York music scene. Performances include sets at the Bell House, at the Small Beast, at the Delancey with percussionist Joseph Benzola, a performance with Kyle Bobby Dunn at Issue Project Room, at Pianos with Richard Lanehart, at Glasslands Gallery with Michael Vincent Waller, at Goodbye Blue Monday with David Beardsley, and with video artist Alex Carpenter at the Tank in Manhattan. James was also at Damrush Park in Lincoln Center as part of the guitar ensemble for Rice Chatham's A Crimson Grail. A recording of the Crimson Grail performance was released on Nonsense Recordings in September 2010. Our own Jim Goodin performed with James at ABC Norio in the COMA series in February 2011. We have a video clip of Jim describing his experiences performing with James Ross. So here, direct from Brooklyn, New York, is Jim Goodin on James Ross.
Paul, hello, and greetings from Brooklyn. James Ross, wow. Let me express a few thoughts about James and how we met, and thoughts about how he's working and influences and similar teachers. We met about, I guess, 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, when Sound In Community was Improv Friday. And anyhow, James and I met through that. I think he posted and we began to exchange and realized we were not far from each other. He lives in Williamsburg and I in Park Slope. And we started discussing trying to meet and maybe get together and play a little bit, see if we had some musical rapport. So we got together for our first session, and that was very insightful. I mean, naturally we were trying to find our way in some ways. What we were doing was all improvisation. And it was, I remember the first session we had some difficulties with trying to record, and there was a little bit of technical stuff, but out of that emerged a couple of pieces that are on my SoundCloud that now I'm sketchy to recall the names, but they were really neat moments, and one of those pieces actually encouraged me to start spending some time with a violin again, which is something I've had a romance with off and on and a battle with. Then we got together a few months later and had a really great session. It was just really inspired. Everything, it was just some magic music came out of that. And that led to, which we'd been talking about doing maybe a show together. And we were able to book something a couple of months later at a downtown, downtown Lower Manhattan venue called ABC No Rio. It's a nonprofit kind of community arts and activist center. And for years, a gentleman there by the name of Blaze Zuela has hosted an improvised music series on Sunday nights, featuring a couple of people and then having an open improv at the end, which is always just a really great event. And so James and I did a set there. I believe it was in February. I want to say 2010. Time's really compressed these days, but it was all improvised and a lot of different textures, and it was a real neat set to me of exploring, because we went from kind of a tentative beginning to evolving very nicely. So it had a lot of rising contrast to me, and then we've since stayed in touch. We haven't done another show together. We've talked about it. We've done we've done a couple more get-togethers. The last one actually was just to get together to hang out and chat about life and everything, and music. And he's real into, or has some history, as Chris Baysville from our community has as well. I'm taking a little tour here just to change the contrast. I'm doing this at home. I was trying to think about going outside, but it's much too noisy right now in the streets early morning. In short, we just, talked about a lot of theory and ideas, and he introduced me more to alternate tuning in the EDO and the just intonation world, which I didn't initially think of as alternate tuning, but it is. It's just I used to work in alternate tunings in another way. But so that was a great session, just getting together and chat and no playing at all. But he's a really interesting guy. He's working. Doing the whole thing I've known him in this incarnation has been working basically with looping, which I think is something that's kind of new to him, because James came out of a more defined classical background, classical guitar background. In fact, that's what brought him to New York to be at Manus, and he wound up studying with a guy I studied with when I first came to New York in the 90s. So that was kind of a bizarre find, a guy named Frederick Hand. We both had some time with, and anyhow, he's evolved. I suspect, as I haven't heard what you talked about, but I suspect that you talked about some of his time spent with the minimalist composer that I'm drawing blank on right now, downtown Lower Manhattan. Man, we'll have to edit that, Paul. I can't. And all I can think of is Terry Riley. That ain't it. Lamont Young. Oh, that'll do it. Okay, leave this in for comic relief. Anyhow, Lamont Young, very long in minimalist music and art. And anyhow, James studied with him for a time, and he's just James brings a lot of artistic integrity. Musical maturity, and is just a nice, kind of down-to-earth, low-ego kind of guy. I can't really say enough good about him in that regard. He's just very sensitive and a great player and thinker. All right, back to you, sir.
That was Jim Goodin in Brooklyn on James Ross. As Jim mentioned, an important influence on the music of James Ross is his study of North Indian classical music and composition with Lamont Young and Marian Zazzila. James toured Germany last year with Lamont, and it was quite an experience. The concert staging involved an elaborate series of dream houses designed by Lamont and built at each location. I remember receiving a Facebook message from James while they were in Karlsruhe. He wrote, "Things have been really crazy lately. Final rehearsals and concert in Berlin, tearing everything down, packing, traveling, setting up in Karlsruhe, and beginning rehearsals here. We've been doing 14 to 16-hour days. Lots of work. Those dream houses don't build themselves. I have a free day here in Karlsruhe. I'm going to bum around the town a bit. Everything is closed here, though, Good Friday, a big holiday in Germany, as you may know. Very quiet. James." As I mentioned earlier, James and I collaborated last year on the album East-West, and the influence of Lamont Young can be heard in this next excerpt from a track on that CD titled Vapor Trails. I'm going to play the last 4 minutes of the piece. Listen how it evolves from a mix of drone-like tones into some lovely melodic guitar playing. That was the last 4 minutes of Vapor Trails by James Ross. You can follow a sort of recapitulation of his musical development and influence, from drone sounds to a quiet melodic style. In his newest CD, Adrift, James continues with his unique mix of guitar and slowly changing tones. Adrift was released last month on Steve Mosier's Innocent Hands Recordings label and features 3 tracks. The first excerpt we will hear is from the title cut. That was an excerpt from Adrift, the title track of the recently released CD by James Ross on Innocent Hands Recordings. In the liner notes, James states that this track was constructed from 3 unsynchronized loops and effects. Of the album, James writes, "In general, all these pieces are music for sleep or drifting in general. Play at a relatively low volume." The last excerpt I will play is from Object, the 3rd track on Adrift. The liner notes state that Object was for EBow electric guitars. Non-synchronous loops create a pan-diatonic wash from a 7-chord sequence of ascending 5th progressions. To me, this track seems to have a bit more of a serious, introspective feel to it, almost an edge. So here is an excerpt from Object. That was a short excerpt from Object, a track from the album Adrift by James Ross, recently released on Innocent Hands Recordings. Please visit the Innocent Hands website, and you can also find James Ross on SoundCloud. I hope you have enjoyed this exploration of the music of James Ross. My name is Paul Muller in Los Angeles, and this has been Words on New Music. Thanks for watching.